DARE. Drug Abuse Resistance Education was an anti-drug program developed in the 80s in Los Angeles by Los Angeles Police Department. It was created and promoted by then Police Chief Daryl Gates, and its goal was to steer young people away from drugs, substance abuse, gang involvement, and other illegal activities. Such a noble, idealistic, and righteous movement was inevitably doomed to be a complete failure from the very beginning, because it literally had the opposite effect of what was intended. Scientists actually studied DARE throughout the 90s and concluded that DARE had, in fact, not helped at all. And actually, it seemed the program had made participants even more likely to try drugs, which, I mean, it's completely understandable when the educational process looked something like this. Hi kids, I am Darren, the DARE lion. You get it? Because my name is Darren, and the program is DARE. Like DARE, and my name is Darren. Like, do you get it, or? Okay. Anyway, see this, kids. This is crack, and let me tell you something. It is amazing. What? It's amazing. You have no idea what you are missing. Never in my entire life have I felt so free, so perfect and pure. I feel like I have been holding my breath my whole life, and I just took my first real inhale. I have been reborn under the touch of the sweetest of poisons. I looked into the eyes of the Prince of Excess, and for the first time in years, I smiled. Do you understand? I felt alive, free from the weight of my sins, free from the torture of memory. Just say no, my ass. How can you look at the key to your freedom and say no? But anyway, you know, like, never try it and stuff, because this stuff, despite making you feel incredibly good, like, I mean incredibly good, it's somehow bad. So, you know, just never try it, just don't touch it. Now I kinda wanna try it. Okay, meet me back. And I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, Pixel, what does a failed America anti-drug program have to do with this?
Let's make the most of the night like we're gonna die young. Beat to the beat of the drums. What a shame that you came here with someone.
Well, it's because DARE now has an English sibling called Pathways. It started as a project focused on promoting equality, mutual respect, and appreciation for foreign cultures,
and somehow
ended up radicalizing the internet with extremely racist and fascist ideologies, and all thanks to the ineptitude of the English government. So now let's talk about Amelia, and how she radicalized the European youth. So, before we talk about Amelia, we first need to understand where she came from. This white supremacist originates from a video game called Pathways, a social project with educational purposes developed by Shoutout UK and directly funded by the English government. Oh great, another video game funded by an European government with the intention of promoting social awareness. I'm sure this won't end up in complete disaster. The game was released in 2023, and at the time it went completely unnoticed on the internet, until very recently. It functions like a Telltale style game, where your character makes dialogue decisions, and depending on the options that you choose, you get different scenarios and endings. Here you play as Charlie, or protagonist of ambiguous gender who is always referred to with they/them pronouns regardless of the gender you choose, which definitely doesn't come across as incredibly pretentious and on the nose like a certain video game. A perfect example of excellent writing. The game itself is very short, it only has 5 acts and you can unlock all the endings in a single day. Although I don't know why you want to do that, that's an hour of your life basically wasted, but you do you. Across those 5 acts, Charlie faces multiple social and political dilemmas. The idea is that you choose the correct options. Easy, right? It should be. The problem is that the correct options are pretty stupid, and that becomes a really serious issue when you remember that this is supposed to be an educational game. Take the very beginning of Act 1 as an example. Charlie here is on the internet. Charlie encounters inappropriate content. Charlie receives an anonymous message telling them to download an unknown video. What do you think Charlie, a young adult in secondary school, legally old enough to work, should do? A. Ignore the message. B. Block the user. C. Close the laptop and go touch some grass. Those seem like logical choices for a young adult, am I right? Well, according to Pathways, the educational video game funded by the British government, Charlie, a young adult, apparently lacks the critical thinking skills to choose any of those options. So instead, you're given this. A. Call a trusted adult. B. Talk to the stranger online to learn more about the video. And C. Download the video. Do you notice how there is absolutely no option where Charlie independently makes the correct decision? You are given 2 negative options, and the only good one requires dependence on an external authority. This happens throughout the entire game. Here's another example. Shortly after you meet Amelia for the first time, she tells you that immigrants are responsible for all the UK problems and that they take jobs opportunities away from English citizens. And after hearing this, your dialogue options are: A. Ignore the comment and ask your course leader for advice on how to improve yourself. B. Ignore the comment and don't express your own frustrations. And C. Agree with Amelia. Once again, here we have the same problem. There is no option for Charlie to take initiative and challenge Amelia's point of view. The only good option involves seeking intervention from an authority figure. And this is not a singular event. This is a pattern that repeats itself across every single act. And this is very important to point out because Amelia herself is not the only reason this project, which aimed to promote social inclusion, ended up contributing to online radicalization and the expansion of fascist ideologies. Because with this reliance on authority, the message that ultimately comes through, it's not awareness, it's obedience. And you can look at the language used in every single scenario. Charlie never tries to understand a problem independently, despite being in university and old enough to work. The character, it's not a child, they are a young adult, infantilizing the intelligence of someone at this stage of life, someone who supposedly cannot distinguish right from wrong. It's not the right way to connect with your target audience, especially if you're a project funded by the UK government, because what you are implicitly expressing is that this is how the government sees the future of its country, as a group of children incapable of thinking for themselves. But this is not the game's only issue. In addition to infantilizing the player's intelligence, it promotes blind trust in the government, because the government knows what's best for you, and it's here to save you. Please do not resist. This is also visible in Act 1. When Charlie browses the internet, the game states that certain inappropriate content could result in you being considered a domestic terrorist. What exactly does the UK government mean by inappropriate content? And it's very important to actually understand this, because there is a very thin line between what is genuinely harmful and what your government decides is harmful. But surely they don't mean criticizing the government corruption on social media or protesting against an ongoing genocide, right? Oh wait, that is exactly what they mean. Because over 500 people were arrested during the protests against the war in Gaza, and even more people were detained over social media posts. The situation became so severe that the British police made over 12,183 arrests in 2023 alone, every single one of them from online posts. This isn't about protecting people from dangerous information, it's about a crisis of freedom of speech. It's about the government trying to silence people into obedience. And that is precisely what the game, intentionally or not, promotes. And this becomes painfully obvious when we remember that Charlie must rely on external authorities to make the correct choices. It's never about their own moral judgment, it's about being told what is right. So, we have 3 critical failures here. First, the infantilization of the protagonist's intelligence, and by extension, the target audience. Second, the imposition of dependence on external authorities to determine what counts as appropriate content. And third, the promotion of blind obedience instead of critical thinking. So remember, the reason Pathways failed, it's not solely because of Amelia. It failed because the game collapses under the weight of its own execution and message. So now that we have established all of that, let's talk about the one and only Amelia. Amelia is the main antagonist of Pathways, a video game and social project that was revealed in 2023, and somehow by 2026 she became the new face of far-right and fascism in all of Europe. But how and why? There are three key factors that caused Amelia to have the effect that she had, and those are design, gameplay, and ideology. Let's start with design. Amelia is the antagonist of Pathways, antagonist being the key word here, and as an antagonist, the character should be hated for being openly racist and having fascist tendencies, and that's why they decided to design her as the wet dream of every incel in the internet. I really cannot even defend this, like seriously, what were they thinking? Doesn't the British government know the internet? Are they not aware of the disproportionate number of racist, emotionally frustrated perverts that exist there? Do they realize that Twitter exists? The best explanation I can think of for this design is that they tried to make a direct reference to those feminazi or toxic feminist groups that generally hate men, in an attempt to show just how toxic and extremist Amelia is. I suppose it's just a speculation, but it's the only thing that I can think of that they try to reference. It is simply a strange design choice, to be honest. I just don't understand why would you make a character that represents an ideology that is horrible and deplorable and make her sexy. It's like if I created a video game that teaches the importance of dieting and my main antagonist, who only eats junk food, looked slim, athletic, and attractive. You are creating an unnecessary trap that only harms the communication of your game's message, which in the case of Pathways, it's supposedly inclusivity. And you're making your racist antagonist hot. For some reason. I am not saying the contrast between aesthetics and personality doesn't apply in other games, but applying it in an educational product whose objective is to steer young people away from this kind of thinking, it's just a very bad decision. Now let's talk about gameplay. Amelia first appears in the second act, shortly after Charlie sees one of his classmates of foreign origin receive a high grade and a job position, while he has no job, no luck, and no bitch. And Amelia introduces herself by literally saying that this particular inconvenience in Charlie's life is empirical evidence of racial favoritism towards immigrants in the United Kingdom, and that they are the reason Charlie can find employment. You know, the classic immigrants are stealing our jobs. And this is a very direct introduction to Amelia and her worldview. So the most rational thing will be for the video game to encourage distance between Charlie and Amelia, since Amelia is incredibly racist. Except the game doesn't do that. Instead, it goes to the extreme of turning Amelia into your close friend. And no, you don't get a choice in this. She automatically, for some reason, becomes your close friend. A closeness that allows her to talk to you in class, send you memes, and invite you to her movement. Why do this? Why push the player to interact friendly with literally a fascist? And every dialogue option that allows you to distance yourself from her is presented as something negative, like when Amelia asks you to support her at the far-right protest. The option literally says, decline the offer and risk losing your friendship. Why does the game insist from the very beginning on making Amelia our friend? It just doesn't make sense. It's another point that I simply cannot understand. Most likely they intended to show that even our closest friends can spread hate. That could have been the idea, but it was very poorly executed, because the introduction of Amelia as our friend is so abrupt and unexpected, especially when we learn this right after she blames immigrants for circumstances beyond their control. Once again, the video game makes very strange decisions when it comes to introducing Amelia and her relationship with Charlie. And finally, we have the last point, and probably the most important: ideology. And this point is critical because it defines the why Amelia had the impact she generated. The reason why Amelia's ideology managed to radicalize the European youth towards the far right is very simple. Amelia made noise where silence and obedience were demanded. Let me explain. Remember, Pathways is not about social acceptance or progressism. It's a game that encourages blind obedience, not questioning our authorities, and where any type of criticism or thought that doesn't align with the government's wishes is considered radical. These are the problems with the game, and that's why Amelia succeeded where she was supposed to fail. The game treats criticism of immigration policies as a sign of radicalization, when in reality the issue is much more complex. Pathways tries to pretend that there is no general dissatisfaction amongst the English population with the current immigration laws, or that cultural and ideological clashes are not real problems. There are issues with immigration laws that require revision, but these are not caused by immigrants, rather by the institutions that represent them and the authorities that define them. The immigration laws require revision, not elimination. And the solution is not to dehumanize a group of people or generalize them based on the mistakes of a minority, because we have to remember, these are human beings, and the vast majority are simply trying to build better lives for themselves and their families. And I speak from experience about this problem. Peru receives massive waves of Venezuelan immigrants every single year, coming from both north and the south. And there is a major cultural clash that makes local citizens uncomfortable, especially when they see criminals of Venezuelan nationality. I have seen firsthand how Peruvians, especially in the capital, generalize Venezuelans as criminals with no culture. And now, almost like magic, everything bad that happens in this country now supposedly becomes their fault, while Congress continues stealing or police participates in extortions and political corruption grows like a cancer. I am not saying that social clashes don't exist or that the crimes committed by foreign citizens don't happen. But actively dehumanizing and generalizing a minority, it's not the solution to any of these problems. It's an invitation to conflict. And what does Amelia do? She criticizes the system, but her declaration is not "I want change." What she says is "I want them out." Not only that, but Amelia also represents a hyper-nationalist ideology, chasing an idealized past that never truly existed, and she believes it can be recovered by getting rid of the impurity that is deconstructing her culture, and that by doing so, magically, everything will be better. This is what we know as the construction of the invisible enemy, and it is one of the core principles of fascism. But what exactly is fascism? Fascism is a far-right hyper-nationalistic movement that opposes liberal democracies, individualism, communism, and the socialist labor movement. Of all the political movements that exist, fascism is the only one that actively seeks the repression of its own society and actively opposes any form of intellectualism. Because the last thing an oppressive nation needs is citizens with critical thinking skills. The Canadian philosopher Jason Stanley, recognized for his studies of fascism ideology, says the following regarding the foundations of this ideology. The instrumentalization of victimhood with dominant groups is a universal element of fascist politics when the idea of sharing citizenship and power with minorities is introduced. White citizens in the United States, for example, believe that significant progress has been made in the terms of racial equality. The truth is that for every $100 a white family earns, a black family receives only $5. White American citizens often believe that racial equality can only be achieved through discriminatory measures against whites. This also goes hand in hand with the creation of the idea of the invisible enemy. Fascism is characterized by this strategy of systematically judging people not by their personal responsibility but by their membership in a group. It exploits feelings of fear and collective frustration, cultivating them through violence, repression, and of course, propaganda, and redirects them towards a common enemy, even if that enemy does not exist.
Fun fact.
Jason Stanley fled the United States saying, and I quote, "I believe we are already a fascist regime." That was last year, and well, evidence can speak for itself. Of course, there are more details and key points that can be exposed in the development of fascism, but for the sake of this video, these are the ones that we'll be covering, because these are the same points that Amelia represents. Invisible enemy, with Amelia blaming every problem in her life and country on the immigrants. Anti-intellectualism, Amelia doesn't like it when you question her or her ideology. And finally, we have collective hysteria and propaganda. Amelia creates and expands a romanticized past of his nation and takes advantage of people's frustrations to take action. But if all of these principles are bad in nature, why did Amelia succeeded in her representation of this political violence? Well, it's all thanks to the English government, and that's because Pathways, the game funded by the British government, oversimplified very serious problems about the immigration crisis, the job market, and the cultural clashes. And the sad truth is that there is no simple answer to these complex problems. The game basically labeled anyone who opposed the government as a domestic terrorist, racist, or socially resentful, and there is no better way to radicalize someone than to treat them as your enemy. The government denied any type of criticism, no matter how fair it was, and redirected the problem toward the population's lack of acceptance. This only increased the collective frustration of a nation whose inhabitants did not feel valued or heard. Where thinking the wrong way is considered a crime, where criticism is interpreted as defiance, where owning a home goes from being common to being a luxury, where the labor market seems to be increasingly hostile towards workers. These people are simply looking for a future in which they can live dignified lives in their own country and feel proud of it. And some, in this case many, will become so desperate and so frustrated that they will accept the words of anyone who offers them a way out, even if that way comes at a cost of their morals, ethics, and critical thinking. Sound familiar? Look, I will never, ever defend fascism or excuse it. It is a disgusting and deplorable political ideology that only spreads oppression, ignorance, and hate. But we also cannot pretend that its origins and ideals have no history or that their emergence is not directly linked to the incompetence of nations that have failed their citizens. Because if we want this not to repeat itself or spread, we must study it and we must understand it. And that is why fascism is anti-intellectual, because it wants to spread. And what better way to expand than among a population that doesn't know how to define it or to recognize it as the enemy? And that is why Amelia found success where she was supposed to fail. She promised an idolized nation justice against an invisible enemy and demanded never to be questioned because this was, according to her, the only way out. And people, especially young people who felt frustrated with their governments, believed her. These ideologies continue to this day destroying the lives of countless human beings, all because of circumstances beyond their control. And the English government has miserably failed in preventing the expansions of these ideals of hate and division. Amelia may be the face of this new wave of far-right conservatism and fascists, but the real people responsible for this ideological disaster are those who are sitting behind the desk of the English Parliament. We are seeing the expansion of this ideology in Europe, but it has already established itself in the United States. The creation of invisible enemies, the prosecution of minorities, hyper-nationalist sentiment, the cult of romanticized past that never truly existed, the cult of blind trust in authorities even when they commit atrocities, public executions, mass detention camps, and human rights violations. They already have their Amelia. The last thing we need is more in Europe. And to those who genuinely believe in these ideals, just remember, you will serve a false prophet, and your only reward will be hell. Thank you for watching. Epilogue. Hey guys, this is Pixel. Thank you for your huge support in the comments of the last video, for all of these wonderful people. It seems that YouTube really likes a certain type of language in his algorithm, so I will try to make more videos in English. It seems they are actually doing pretty well, because the last video that was in English just did better than all of the previous videos combined, so I think I will keep doing that. I just want to say thank you to all of you for keep supporting the channel. We are still very few, but we are growing, so that is what matters. And also because I see this more as a hobby than anything else, so I'm actually enjoying it a lot. Once again, thank you for all of your support, and if you want to help me, then you can subscribe if you want, or don't. But please do. But yeah, that's about it. Just thank you. Yeah, thank you.